It really is great to be here, and it's great to speak the 5th year in a row, and I recognize I'm here between you and lunch. But I think we have to talk a little bit about Homeland Security and our efforts to secure the homeland. We're all here to do that, and I've heard a lot from the speakers this morning and from the panel that resonate, I hope, well with all of you. This GEOINT is a great foundation, really is. And what Stu Shea has done is just magnificent. Keith Mossback, an old colleague of mine, will do wonderfully well in his new position. Teddy Roosevelt once said, old age is like everything else. To make a success of it, you have to start young. Well, I started sort of young in this business and with the Central Intelligence Agency when I was 22. Before I begin, I really want to also acknowledge the strong relationship that my department has and with Mike McConnell, with Bob Mueller over at the FBI. You just had a great representative of the Bureau here. The National Counterterrorism Center, Mike Leiter, with whom I work on a daily basis against threats. Obviously, Jim Clapper, who is truly a great and good man, and you heard that this morning. And obviously, Bob Moret. Bob Moret's a great supporter of Homeland Security. He is stretched around the globe, but he always comes home and helps us when we need help in the department from geospatial requirements. I do want to thank our private sector partners, our state, local, tribal. We saw Dave Mitchell here, who also work around the clock to protect the country, keep the Americans safe. That's our job in this life, is to keep the country safe. And as we move through this transition period, whoever is elected president, whichever comes to power, they've got to realize their first responsibility is to keep this country safe. I want to say just a couple of things about legislation. Don't usually spend much time worrying about it, but the 9/11 Implementation Act really did codify DHS intelligence efforts to reach out to non-federal partners such as state and local fusion centers. It also authorized my office to share information with state, local, tribal, and private sector partners. Dave Mitchell spoke of the importance of that and the need to right to release. That's something we should really think about when we sit in Washington. It is the people in the front line that needs our information, whether here or overseas. More recently, the executive order, and I give Mike McConnell a lot of credit for that, 12333, codified DHS's intelligence into that order signed by the President. Because now I can formally collect, analyze, produce, disseminate intelligence, as well as counterintelligence to support national and departmental missions, conduct and participate in analytic and information exchanges with foreign governments. That does help. It really also mandated the need for greater information sharing with our state and local partners, which are really core statutory customers and program partners for DHS intelligence. As we look to the future of geospatial intelligence, we should be mindful of the unique capabilities that enhance our homeland security and ultimately the nation's security, looking at them through the lens of the revised roles, new authorities, many customer sets, including our non-federal partners. I really want to talk a little bit about what are DHS's intelligence activities. Intelligence community has traditionally focused overseas at the international partners. The IC's interaction with state, local, tribal, and law enforcement and other first responders intentionally in the past was non-existent or very limited at best. But Homeland Security in the post-9/11 world requires a new paradigm for intelligence support. My task as the Undersecretary and Chief Intelligence Officer of the Department is to lead the effort to develop a vision for, design the architecture of, and implement a comprehensive Homeland Security intelligence program that is fully integrated into the traditional intelligence community, but which equally and I emphasize equally, reaches out to new partners at the state and local government levels, as well as that private sector. When I spoke to you last year, I highlighted the evolution of our department under Secretary Chertoff and spent a good deal of time discussing the emerging missions of DHS intelligence. Well, the department has made progress in supporting the Secretary's top priority missions. And it's very important that you understand those. Protect the homeland from dangerous people. Protect the homeland from dangerous goods and materials. And protect our critical infrastructures, as Rob Zitz pointed out. To support the DHS mission, I focus on three distinct customer sets. First, I support the Secretary, the department elements, the operating components like CBP and ICE. Secondly, and equally important, I support the state, local, and tribal, territorial, and private sector partners. They must have access to intelligence and information while ensuring that the department has access to the information at the state and local levels. There's a lot of intelligence out there that we need to collect. Third, as a member of the intelligence community, I obviously support Mike McConnell, and as Rob Riegel just noted, we write for the National Intelligence Bulletin, we write for the President's Daily Brief on occasion. The organization of the department reflects its broad responsibilities. It's the third largest department in the United States, behind Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration. And it has a huge area of responsibility, protecting our airways, waterways, and borders, responding to natural disasters, enforcing immigration, customs, counterfeiting laws, and performing intelligence analysis. The diversity of the DHS missions and the totality of the threats we face are evidence that Homeland Security is not a domestic issue. In this globalized world, it is truly a national security issue. Let me just give you a couple of examples of what DHS does daily. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, processes more than 1 million passengers, and pedestrians, 70,000 containers, and more than 300,000 air, sea, and land vehicles. That's every day. TSA screens 2 million passengers, and we all go through that, and nearly as many pieces of checked luggage before they board a commercial aircraft. Citizen Immigration Services conducts 135,000 national security background checks and adjudicates 200 refugee applications every day. So this department is huge, it's broad, has great responsibilities, and it works together, despite what the press may say. It works together. I hope not all of you believe everything that's in print. The United States continues to face strategic threats. Most immediately, it remains engaged in a sustained struggle against the violent ideological extremism of al-Qaeda, its core leadership, its affiliated networks, and a growing number of followers who are radicalized, either self-radicalized or radicalized by messages coming in. Next, beyond terrorism, we also recognize the threats facing the United States are more complicated and transcend international borders and can evolve rapidly, more rapidly than ever before. In this highly globalized world, distant threats can manifest themselves at the border or reach into our borders in virtual ways. Currently, the current international terrorism threat from al-Qaeda highlights the important shift in the global environment. For example, al-Qaeda continues to reach inside the United States borders through its messaging. Al-Qaeda is improving its ability to translate its messages to target American Muslims who may be susceptible to supporting violence in the name of religion. A year ago, al-Qaeda solicited for English translators and then ratcheted up the speed and accuracy of translated statements, openly marketed to U.S. and other English-speaking audiences. To help al-Qaeda target U.S. citizens, several radical websites in the United States have repackaged al-Qaeda statements with American vernacular and commentary aimed at swaying our citizens here in this country. We just saw Adam Gadon speak this month. Again, he had worked to talk about Pakistan, also to undermine U.S. policy in South Asia. We also have a former spiritual leader who was in this country, who spoke out of Yemen, who was also the spiritual leader to 3 of the September 11 hijackers, a guy named Nalaki, who has online lectures encouraging terrorist attacks from his new home in Yemen, attacks against the United States interests here and abroad. But we have other threats as well: drug traffickers, alien smugglers that evade our border security procedures. As DHS analysts monitor the activities of international terrorists, we also remain on guard against the possibility that Latin American drug trafficking organizations, which know how to penetrate our borders and have extensive logistical networks, might support such a terrorist undertaking. Within the United States, we also have domestic terrorism. Dave Mitchell talked about that. With their spectrum of ideological beliefs, white supremacists, radicals who support violence in the name of religion, eco-terrorists, and others. Because of this diverse landscape, our department's analytic efforts are focused on all threats, all hazards, not just terrorism, although terrorism is a centerpiece of our efforts. We look at terrorism through the prism of Homeland Security, which has these broader sets of threats. We focus on 5 areas in our intelligence efforts. First, border security. I have an office set up to deal with border security. We didn't have that when I arrived, now we have it. We've got to keep dangerous people out. My analysts track a full range of threats to our borders, including terrorists, special interest aliens, drug traffickers, alien smugglers, and transnational gangs, which will bring anything across the border for money. We look at special interest aliens from countries that have weak counterterrorism programs and policies or have failed states, and there are several dozen of those. I produce a monthly border security monitor, which informs senior officials and operators across our customer set on activities ranging from drug trafficking to alien smuggling to money laundering. We also put out a Cubagram every month. DHS has unique access to Customs and Border Protection, as well as Coast Guard data, which enables us to provide the most accurate and timely assessments on the flow of migrants from Cuba attempting to enter the United States. That's sort of unique. We can do it very accurately. The second area is protecting our country against dangerous materials. We have an office that works on chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological threats inbound to this country. Our goal, of course, is to keep the most dangerous materials out of the most dangerous actors. We work as the intelligence arm of the DHS's Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, as well as the National Biosurveillance Integration System, about which a lot of people don't have much knowledge, but it exists. It's very important. And I've just joined in partnership with Mike Maples and the new National Center for Medical Intelligence. That used to be the Air Force Intelligence Center. Now we are a partner. We're partnered with Defense. And we're very proud to be support and provide the Deputy Director of this new center. We provide detailed assessments that are incorporated into the design and development of high technology sensors that can detect harmful CBRN materials at airports and other sites. Third area, of course, and I believe there's reference to that by Rob Zitz, of course, with the critical infrastructures. There are 18 sectors of our society, and those have to be protected. We produce detailed assessment characterizing the threats to these infrastructures in all 50 states, the National Capital Area, and U.S. territories. And we have to do the baseline threat assessments that go into an algorithm which helps with grants, which Dave Mitchell spoke about that fusion centers need so badly. We do the threat. We don't make the policy decisions. We keep intelligence right where it should stay on intelligence. The Secretary and others make the decisions. Demographics, our analysts assess demographic movements around the world and in the United States. This enables us to develop an accurate picture of dangerous people who might want to come to our borders. We have been designated by the DNI to do the Visa Waiver Country Program assessments. And as you know, we're very pleased and very proud to do these. Our analysts travel abroad look at with the Department of State, DNI, and others to do these assessments. Our analyst efforts directly contributed to the U.S. granting visa waiver status to 7 roadmap countries. President Bush announced just the other day that the United States is rescinding visa requirements for 6 European countries and South Korea. And this is a good thing, good decision, and we're proud to be part of it. Our analysts are also concerned about dangerous people inside our borders, especially those who are trying to recruit for or engage in violent extremism. While we focus primarily on the process of radicalization or how individuals adopt extremist belief systems that lead to their willingness to support, facilitate, use violence, or cause social change, our analysts also aid state and local officials to understand the domestic operational landscape. Radicalization in the United States is not an academic issue, but a real threat, and we and our partners in law enforcement at the federal, state, and local levels follow the growth in extremism in this country very carefully. When we work very closely on this and in partnership with the FBI, there's no competition there, in partnership with the FBI and the National Counterterrorism Center. You've seen nascent plots like that at Fort Dix, where they wanted to kill soldiers coming out of the fort. And again, just going back to Dave Mitchell's point, a local citizen talking to a local police led to the unraveling of that plot. And I can cite other examples of that. Terrorists are not the only violent domestic extremists who can potentially threaten our country. We have all kinds of those. We have, as the headlines show today, we have racial supremacists, we have anarchists, eco-terrorists, animal rights radicals, and we have to deal with those as well. The best intelligence is meaningless if we do not have mechanisms in place to share it in a timely way with our operational partners. Prior to September 11th, the U.S. intelligence community did not have a culture or common process for sharing across federal agencies, let alone with our state, local, tribal, and private sector partners. Well, we've made progress in that. We've made progress, not only ourselves, the FBI and others. I'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do, though. We have unique requirements that transcend systems views, and it requires that we approach it from a cultural and organizational perspective as well. The unique challenge is to bridge the information sharing gaps between classified and unclassified, just what Dave Mitchell was talking about. Federal and non-federal law enforcement, federal and non-federal, law enforcement and non-law enforcement. We have to bridge and move information across these great domains which in the past have been greatly divided by law and by policy. Building and improving our relationships with state, local, tribal, and private sector partners is a cornerstone of the Department's information sharing efforts. Over the past 2.5 years, not only have we made progress, but this has been reinforced in statute or executive orders. And it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. We have stood up a state and local Fusion Center Program Office, which Rob Riegel heads, dedicated to supporting state fusion centers throughout the country. And as he said, 50 primary fusion centers have been designated. There are probably up to 70 fusion centers if you total them all up. These fusion centers are a center of gravity to exchange information between the federal and state and local. And our program office is responsible for deploying officers to these centers nationwide. I have representatives in the field who are providing daily analytic support, routinely communicating and exchanging information with other fusion centers, writing products for with state and local partners, collaborating on research and delivering intelligence products to all customers. Deployed officers also provide analytic training opportunities and real-time threat warning guidance directly to state and local partners. We will have 35 centers staffed by the end of this calendar year. We intend to have 50 next year, and eventually we'll have officers at up to 70 officers across the country. We also are providing access to intelligence information at both classified and unclassified levels. The Homeland Security Information Network, or HISN, Intel Portal, provides information to more than 10,000 people with access to unclassified intelligence products. We're also, for classified secret level information, we're deploying the HSDN, Homeland Security Data Network, which is a robust cybernet-like capability at fusion centers across the country. With this network, we're delivering the classified information to state and local authorities on a very regular basis. And if you have HSDN, then you get the National Counterterrorism Center online products at the secret level. And we're talking about hundreds of products. It's a cornucopia of good information that can be used at the fusion center levels. We're clearing those people at the fusion center levels that need it at the secret level, and they have direct access. There's no federal person in the loop. They can use it directly, and that's the way things ought to be. We've also established Homeland Security State and Local Community of Interest, which is called the Homeland Security SLIC. This is a first network of federal, state, and local intelligence analysts talking together. We meet every week on intelligence threats and this is password protected at the official use level. And then every 2 weeks we have secure level video conferences at the secret level. This is great. We have 45 states, the District of Columbia, and several federal agencies. And I will submit that a couple of years ago, we had none of this. The department had none of this, and I'm very pleased that with our partners we're able to do this. We've also formed, under NCTC management, an interagency threat assessment and coordination group. And one of my officers serves as its director. This staff includes 4 state and local law enforcement officers on rotational assignments. The idea is to bring in experts from law enforcement, from public health, from fire departments, who can help us think through what do state and local officials want, what will really help them. It's not going to be these high-level policy assessments that are intelligence assessments to support high-level policy. It's going to be things that will show us tactics, techniques, and procedures that will help them deal with all hazards, all threats at the local level. And that's where we are. And it's called the ITAG-G, and it really does look at sensitive databases, screens thousands of highly classified reports, and then works to sanitize those to get those down to the lowest level possible. So I believe that, again, that's another era in our quiver that has just come on board. That's been in existence about 9 months. I'm very, very pleased. Just as our current geospatial capabilities were born from the decisions made decades ago, our capabilities of tomorrow depend on the decisions and investments we make today. I notice you'll have Scott Large and others talking to you, and I know he'll be very candid with the challenges. 22 years ago in 1996, commercial imagery was just beginning to spring into view the world's watchful eye, as news outlets used Landsat 5 and spot infrared imagery to provide the world its first confirmatory evidence looks at the effect and impact of the Chernobyl disaster. I remember that well. April 1986. Objective evidence of the nuclear disaster was seen from afar in households across the globe. Since that time, we've seen exponential growth in the use of geospatial products in private and public sectors. What we see today, few could have dreamed of 22 years ago. And 22 years from now, in the year 2030, as the next generation of leaders and analysts look back at this time, they will examine the decisions we're making now and evaluate them for our wisdom, foresight, and clarity of purpose. And as Rich Haver said, let's hope those decisions are made right, that going on a diet does not mean that we have the enormous downturn we had between 1993 and 1999. What will they see when they look back in time? It all depends. It depends on us. It depends on us developing good technology and be efficient and effective. It also depends on our policymakers, the new administration, and our Congress. But ultimately, it's in the interest of the American public at stake here. So it is so crucial that these decisions be made well and thoughtful. For DHS, and in fact the whole intelligence community, in my view, the key, this is Charlie Allen speaking, is diversity and availability. The survivability and flexibility of future systems should be a singularly important consideration in planning the next generation collection. A very good strategy and description was articulated by my good friend, Peter Marino. It was done for the director of the NGA about 18 months ago. And you can quarrel with it or you can agree with it, but it does describe an architecture that allows for a short time between launch, as well as an option for variable modalities. This kind of diversity is what I believe will be necessary to assure adequate collection on a wide array of targets. The concepts are built around a modular bus design, built in assembly line fashion. The design would allow plug-and-play payload, the choice of which could be made by the government at the time close to launch. It could also, at the government's desire, fly a system or systems at any altitude with a choice with some trade-off of resolution with system life. The assembly line could theoretically put buses on a 3 to 6 month centers, which can be a quick response to some unanticipated mishap with a system that was already flying. The added benefit of this approach is the cost reductions that should be achieved with a continual line of low-cost buses and payloads. As the report points out, there's plenty of work to be done to make this approach feasible. However, when successful, it would give the department, my department certainly, the diversity and availability that I think we need. In sum, we must develop agility and all the while advocate broad-based intelligence capabilities to support national security objectives at home and abroad, capabilities that support our enduring requirements. As Rob Zitz pointed out so well, the Department of Homeland Security's imagery requirements are significantly greater in scope, number, than there were at the department's creation. And they're going to grow at an accelerating rate as the department's mission space evolves. Reliable, real-time information in geospatial intelligence allows us to identify and characterize threats, target our security measures, and achieve unity of efforts in our response. It also allows the department components to conduct intelligence-based and often intelligence-driven operations. The department's responsibility for securing borders, supporting state and local entities, and responding to incidents make it imperative that we have access to space and airborne assets necessary to meet the needs of the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security. Specifically, DHS relies on GEOINT for a broad area coverage to prepare for and recover from disasters, natural, man-made, or otherwise. DHS components also have access to vast amounts of data, which geospatially and temporally cataloged could advance analysis in order to better protect our nation. On secure borders, we have a border campaign plan using NTM, using GEOINT. Our focus has been on the southwest border, but we also focus over time on the northern border. Geospatial products and intelligence were a key contributor to DHS, FEMA, and state and local officials' preparation for and response to recent natural disasters, Hurricane Gustav, Hannah, and Ike, the Midwest floods in June, and the series of California wildfires this past summer. Commercial and national technical mean products were used to help assess damage, aid in debris removal, inform local urban search and rescue efforts, and support DHS's National Operations Center as it provided the department-wide awareness to track incident management and response efforts, the so-called Common Operation Picture that Rob Zitz talked about. The U.S. Secret Service is a lead federal agency for national special security events and geospatial products that play an important role in pre-planning and operational execution, of interagency support to events like this year's political conventions. Obviously, the inauguration of a new president will also be a national special security event and will require, again, support from NGA, Bob Moret, and our national technical assistance. As you know, intelligence is not only about spies and satellites, it's also about thousands and thousands of routine, everyday observations and activities. These scattered bits, each of which may be taken in isolation as a not particularly meaningful piece of information, gives us, when fused together and put in geospatially and temporally relevant order, a sense of the patterns and flow that can advance our analytic capabilities. As outlined in my earlier discussion on DHS missions, DHS is full of this information. DHS generates a great deal of information with intelligence value. We're virtually an information factory, producing data based on thousands of interactions every hour at the border, in airports, in the interior United States or in its waters. These interactions have a geospatial and also temporal component to them, and the entire community would benefit from being able to more effectively capture the location data and time-based activity into these reports. I am, with the Secretary's support, establishing a National Applications Office. It will be a successor to the Civil Applications Committee. It will focus on Homeland Security and civil applications, scientific applications. The NIO, as it knows, will be on the cutting edge for supporting DHS stakeholders, includes a mechanism to bring, among other things, geospatial products and activities to bear in support of civil and support of Homeland Security. I want to emphasize, and I hope everyone understands this, the NIO is designed with the strongest protection of privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties in mind. The NIO charter was signed by the Secretaries of Homeland Security, Defense, Interior, as well as the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General. And it certifies that the NIO complies with all existing laws, including all applicable privacy and civil liberty standards. The NIO is prepared to begin operations to support civil and Homeland Security domains. In conclusion, Secretary Chertoff wrote about September 11, 2001. He said our country was senselessly attacked and nearly 3,000 lives were tragically lost. That fateful day changed our nation and history. Even though the day was more than 7 years ago, the threat has not passed, and the country's adversaries remain committed to do us harm. All you have to do is read what is being said by our adversaries abroad. They have been foiled by many factors, including the dedicated men and women of the Department of Homeland Security and all the departments at the federal, state, and local and private sector levels that I've spoken about earlier. All of us are dedicated every day to continue to defend the homeland. The threats are going to continue. We're going to have to truly continue to deal with these threats. I keep hearing that we have threat fatigue, that it's been 7 years since we've been attacked. That's no accident, because we've been proactive, as Mike Hayden says. We've played offense. We've played offense here at home on our borders. We've secured our air, land, and sea borders to some degree. Land borders still have a lot to do, but we've played offense. There should never be any threat fatigue in this country. If we have the strength and resiliency that I think we have, we'll never sit here and worry over threat fatigue. Every day, I get up at 0400 hours to go to work to get my first intelligence briefing at 5:30. I think all of us have that same kind of sense of duty and mission. And I think this country will continue. Attempts to attack us will continue. We may be attacked again, but I think we have strength and resiliency like no other country in the world, because I do believe in one thing. And I've heard some people say they no longer believe in it, but I do. It's called American exceptionalism. And I know everyone in this audience believes very strongly in that creed. that we are exceptional. We're a country made up of dedicated, free citizens, aimed to prosper and help lead this world into a safer civilization. I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, Charlie, I agree with you. Give the other guy threat fatigue. What do you say? Well, I want to give the other guy threat fatigue.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're working at it.
Well, there are a lot of questions, Charlie. I'm trying to summarize a few of them because there are a couple that are very similar. I'll read one of them, but I think it speaks for about three of the questions. What is your view as to the progress made in affording those on the front lines domestically access to classified intelligence in the same manner we support our troops overseas? As I say, that's a variation on about three other questions, all asked about the same thing. Sharing.
I think the progress has been significant. It's not strong enough. I meet frequently with senior officials from around the country who serve in the chiefs of police of major cities, who sit on the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council, other National Sheriff's Association, and this is an area of deep concern to them. We still in Washington still have a penchant to put a lot of caveats on what we write, and whether it's our own analysts or analysts around the community, I do believe, though, that there's been enormous progress made. We are able to share information. Like I say, like this, I tell the Secretary, if the threat comes to Tennessee, if a threat, and we have information that it's headed towards Tennessee, I pick up the phone and I call Dave Mitchell. And regardless of the classification, he needs to know that. He needs to know that. And we need to find a way, and we work very ably with NSA, CIA, and others to sanitize that information. Part of our problem, I think it was alluded to here in the panel, is dissemination. Getting it on a timely basis, the right level, at the right time. I think we have much work to do there. I think we have to spread our Homeland Security secure information out there. Part of it, of course, depends on real initiative at the state level. They have to really certify that they can receive secret level materials. And of course, there are federal regulations and policies that have to be accepted. We will not compromise our security, but we'll not compromise our security by not getting the information down there. The information sharing environment efforts that we have in the department, I am the executive agent for the department, designated by the Secretary. I serve on the Information Sharing Governance Board. We have these new networks going out there. We do this with NCTC. We do this with the FBI. We do it in complementary ways that do not get in front of each other. But we have a long way to go. But in 2 years, we've come a long way. 2 years from now, I think you'll see a far better integrated flow of information at state and local levels.
Well, you scared me a little earlier when you talked about 2030. You'll probably be there to give that briefing, Charlie. Harris and I will have to be wheeled in a wheelchair, but we'll be listening to you. How closely does DHS work with Canadian intelligence agencies, especially with respect to securing our borders? What can you say about our northern friends?
Well, our Canadian colleagues, we don't talk a lot about intelligence liaison, as Rich knows only too well, but let it be said that the Canadian Border Services Agency has absolutely new leadership, new director, a new president, a new deputy director. I just met with them recently. We clearly have a lot of work to do together. It's clear that the Canadian government is concerned by extremism and by radicalization. But at the intelligence levels, I want to work very hard to improve those relationships and the sharing of information. I look to other agencies to take the lead in dealing with many of the Canadian services. and the National Counterterrorism Center obviously has much to do in this arena. But we meet regularly. We have analytic exchanges with the Canadians, the Canadian Border Services agencies. We meet with them frequently. There's a meeting that comes up in November where we'll have an all-day session talking about northern border matters. I think we have work to do, and I think our Canadian colleagues are leaning forward in this area to help.
Charlie, can you explain the Department of Homeland Security's media analysis capabilities, its role in formulation of accurate intelligence pictures, and efforts to ensure its accuracy and veracity?
You're talking about, I assume, about media that would be seized at the border from people that are being turned around or detained. Foreign nationals, that's the only thing that I deal with, essentially, almost all foreign nationals, but people. We work closely with the DNI and the National Media Exploitation Center in that area, and we do not engage in, at least from an intelligence perspective, there are certain authorities to Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Protection that are separate, that have been long-standing, long before we had an intelligence arm to DHS. We deal fundamentally, if there are dangerous people trying to come into our country, we have an interest in knowing who they are and what information they may have with them. And I would say that our work there has been remarkably good. The INMEC, which is run by the DNI, we're run by DIA under DNI auspices, has done a very effective job.
There have been several questions, and I'll try to lump them into one here. What's going on in Department of Homeland Security on the cybersecurity initiative? What can you say about that and its role in DHS and intelligence?
Well, obviously, this is a great issue, and we're all deeply concerned about states and non-states attacking our networks. We know that hackers attack our networks constantly from around the world, constantly trying to get into our information systems. And as a result, I think, of really excellent work by Mike McConnell. I think the rose is sort of, to some degree, was pinned on him at least to get this initiative underway. There's real responsibilities for the Department of Defense and General Cartwright and others in looking at overseas and how to deal with threats or how to counter such threats. The Department's role is a defensive role. It is at this stage to work with the government, the civil side of the government, .gov. Obviously, Bob Gates has a responsibility for .mil and the defense industrial base. But with .gov, we have, 26, 28 civil government departments and agencies. Their networks needs to be secured. Part of that is, of course, to ensure that we limit the accesses to those networks. We're in the early stages of forming a program office that will work to counter that. I believe you've heard of Einstein 2, which is being tested, which will help us detect intrusions into the civil side. The Secretary of Homeland Security has spoken about this in a number of fora. He's very determined and is very pleased to move forward with this program. I'm very pleased with the response of the administration and very much the response of the Congress to help fund a cyber initiative. And then there's another segment to this, which is .com. That's a little more challenging because most of the infrastructure in this country is privately owned, 85, 90%. We have to find ways to deal with that. We have to work in a cooperative way, and as a result, we've had outreach and exchanges with the private sector. And the private sector really understands the threat to their systems.
We got time for one more, Charlie, and there have been several questions up here about SBInet, the GEOINT implications, worried about it at a standstill. What can you say about the Custom Border Patrol SBInet?
SB9net is, of course, the emphasis is on the southern border, but the emphasis again is on the northern border. This is a program office with a large primary contractor and other subcontractors. It's coming along. There's quite a bit of fence being put up, and the fence is only being put up in urban areas where it makes sense, not in desert areas. It is other kind of sensors are being used for that. What Ralph Basham, who is the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, I just met with him yesterday, what he talks about is intelligence-driven border operations at the port of entry, but most particularly between the ports of entry. Chief Aguilar, who runs the Border Patrol, very attentive to the idea of having intelligence-driven activities. We work at this problem every day. As I said, we put out assessments and assess how well we're doing on a very regular basis. There's a new Assistant Commissioner for Intelligence Operations within Customs and Border Protection. Ralph Basham and I working together and I give great credit to the Commissioner for forming this new integrated effort in intelligence within Customs and Border Protection. As a Chief Intelligence Officer, I have oversight of all the Department's intelligence activities.
Geospatial intelligence is vitally important to our national security. USGIF is dedicated to building a stronger GEOINT community spanning industry, academia, government, and professional organizations. Visit usgif.org to learn more. USGIF, where our national security begins.